Welcome to Casting Class, the engineer's podcast for all things metal casting. Casting Class is brought to you by Batesville Products, the manufacturing experts who have been casting, machining, and polishing custom aluminum components for over 75 years.
So we have a pretty interesting topic today. One that at Batesville Products we've been seeing at least over the last 5 or so years more frequently. Started to see a larger influx of product that was still viable out in the market space that needed new homes. So today I actually have Rachel Weber and Stephanie Randolph joining me to really talk about what we call tooling transfer here at Batesville Products. And really trying to ensure that you can find a home for your product. So with that, let's get you guys started here. So as I mentioned, a lot of different things going on out in the marketplace. Companies going out of business, tools you're having issues with. What are some things that maybe Stephanie, your current customer base, what kind of issues are you seeing, or that your current customer base is running into?
Yeah, that's a question that we ask often, Tim. Both Rachel and I make it a point to ask our customers or potential customers what problems they're having in the marketplace. It could be a pricing situation. They're looking for more competitive. Quality is huge, right? So quality is definitely a number one problem that I see in my seat that we help our potential customers and current customers overcome. Lead times are often problematic. Communication. What we found with a lot of potential customers and customers that they're offshoring their current products now, having access to their vendors in the States is super duper important. They want to be able to visit their potential vendor. They want to have access to their consultants at a reasonable amount of time, and most every day during the workday. Those buckets are where I find hard landing for problems that customers may be having when they're considering a tool transfer.
Yeah, and I would definitely say being able to access your vendor is kind of been a big point lately, making sure you can get in and see them. They're an easy travel distance to get to, especially if there is something that's going wrong or you guys need to make a change in the process. It's a much easier communication than it would be if you were working, for example, with someone overseas on your product.
Yeah, and one of the most recent things that I've been in discussions with is how a customer could add a vendor depth to their catalog. So they may even decide to have 2 tools at 2 separate locations so they can produce the amount of parts that's required for the EAUs every year, Tim.
Yeah, and also when you say vendor depth, you could also think about it as how much capability does that vendor have at their facility. So are they only providing you a casting, or can they provide you a turnkey part where it's machined and coated complete to your facility?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think some interesting points you guys hit on there, but really when it boils down to it, what is the specific issue that you're having? What's your pain point? There's a lot going on, not just in the consolidation of the market, but you got a number of wars going on. What type of weather's impacting your availability to get your product? What's your pain point, and does it fit your current supplier, or is it time for you to look for a new supplier?
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's pretty accurate.
So when somebody approaches you, can you talk a little bit about, where you start, really helping that person deal with the pain they're currently feeling?
So there are 5 steps to transferring your mold. Step 1 is research and visit with potential foundries. Step 2 is describe your mold and casting to new supplier. Step 3, get a quote with piece price, tooling, cost, and lead time. Step 4, send your mold for retrofitting. And step 5, approve samples and FAI to launch production.
We've identified really 5 key items, best bit of information within the 5 categories of the best way to transfer your mold. And the first one is always going to be research and visit with your potential foundry or supplier. That's how you build the relationships. That's how you understand who they are and what service they're going to provide you, and if they can solve the problems that you present.
Yeah, definitely. So once you kind of understand what you're looking for and you visit and you build that relationship, you can start kind of getting down the road of, hey, what does your mold look like? Mm-hmm. Can you get pictures? Because sometimes it can be a touchy subject on whether you can provide that information of that mold from the current supplier you're using.
Mm-hmm. Pictures are always best with dimensions and very detailed on health of that mold, and describe that to the best of your ability to your sales consultant, right? Because internally, we're going to transfer that to our engineering team and get with those folks and say, hey, this is the problem statement that we presented. This is the mold that we could possibly be bringing into organization. Is it fit for casting, right? So we want their input as well. We have a lot of experts in the confines of Batesville Products can walk us through that.
And if you can't get pictures of the mold and there is no tooling solid model that exists, some steps that a foundry can take would be to reverse engineer the design of the mold so they can understand what they're working with. So when they receive the mold in, there's some steps they can take, like scanning the mold, reverse engineering it so they have a solid file of the mold itself. The reason for doing that is so that you can run a finite element analysis on the mold so that you can understand adjustments to the gating you can make without touching the part itself or adding either risers or anything like that in general. And then also understanding metal temp, mold temp, flow time, tilt time. Do you want a steady tilt time or variability tilt time? Applying all those things that your foundry knows how to do to get the best casting you can from the existing mold you have. Understand where you could see potential wear and where you can make modifications or repairs to the mold before you actually start casting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to go to your point, Rachel, about the mold quality is, do you have an idea of how many shots or pores that mold has against it? Because it's really going to paint the picture of its health.
You two had mentioned things such as picture, size of the mold. Does it fit in the press that you're transferring it to? Is it coming off a press that's a special press, right? Hey, does this fit at current vendor A and current vendor B, or are they completely different entities here? And there's a lot that needs to get figured out. Obviously, understanding all of the pain and understanding the changes that may or may not be made really helps you with step 3 here.
That would definitely be, you know, if we've established as a vendor for our potential customers, let's get a quote with a piece price, the tooling cost, any additional tooling cost that Batesville Products may have to do to onboard that to our organization specifically. And then the lead time that would come along with doing a run for the potential customer.
What would be involved in maybe a tooling cost that you would see from a tooling transfer?
You'll see retrofitting costs, so us doing just what I said before, where you're repairing the mold, replacing any of the venting bolts, adding any quick change plates, stuff like that. And then FEA analysis. You'll see some fixturing, whether you need to have a straightening fixture or a machining fixture or a coating rack, things like that, depending upon what your secondary requirements are. But also is included as a first article inspection part as well.
So a question around what you were talking about here with retrofitting. Is it cheaper or more effective to transfer a mold rather than buying a new one?
You might be more caught, depending upon how long the part's going to be in existence, to do a new tool, just based off of the life cycle of the part. But depending upon if it's an existing mold and you know it's running well, transferring can work just as well. It really depends upon where your current mold is and determining whether if it's in a good quality state or if it's at the end of its life and it's recommended anyways to get a new tool. It really just depends mold by mold. And you can transfer a tool and that foundry can run it until they get the new one up and running so that you can maintain your volume while a new tool is being built.
Right, it's the lifespan of the tool that's super important as well. So if we know that we determine life cycle or span of that tool, and we know that it's in its last years of its life or a year of its life, then obviously tooling up a new tool is important so that we don't have losses of inventory or assembly for our customers, etc.
Are there any price breaks on quantities when quoting, or what's a good way to look at that?
Yes.
Yeah. And how we typically look at it is what's your annual usage, and we recommend the amount of quantities to order based off of that annual usage. But then again, it's also based off of how you like to purchase as well and maintain your inventory. So we're adjustable to the quantity breaks that we can provide, but we will upfront recommend what we think is best for the mold.
we could put in a price or a break of 250 because we are experts in our field and understand that that mold has to be pulled at the maximum of 250 units. And it's PM's schedule at that point.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we can't put it back into production the next day or the day after that, but if we need, X amount of time, which is usually about, it depends on the mold, so I can't really define that now, but say there's an 8-hour shift that involves a preventative maintenance on the mold. So that's where we go with those quantities, Tim.
So if I can steal words out of your mouth, what you guys are looking to try and do is really maximize the setup and minimize setup costs as a recommendation to say, hey, we think we can run 400, 410, 411, 5,000 before taking this off to do the PM, as you were mentioning, Stephanie. But a customer may say, hey, if I take 5,000 parts all at once, it's way too much for my inventory. And we kind of work, hey, what ends up being best for the customer? What ends up being best to try and maximize that setup cost?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
I didn't really touch base on that, but absolutely, Tim.
Step 4, send your mold for retrofitting. So there's a couple different things you can do. Here at BPI, we encompass retrofitting under variable different things. So one is just making sure all of the working parts of the mold are replaced and looking good, like vents, bolts, pins, all of that stuff. But also what includes is, again, what we talked about is doing the FEA to make sure that we're running the mold correctly and that the mold fits up to our press correctly.
Mhm.
And then there's also doing blue fitting, but that's always a nice step to take to make sure that your part has got fresh parting line, not excessive flash going on. It's just a nice way to repair or maintain the mold, especially when you get a new one in.
Yeah,
Or a
absolutely.
used new one.
Right, because we don't have records of their preventative maintenance programs at another vendor.
Yeah.
So that allows us to get familiar with the mold, right? So that when we do launch it into production, it's successful.
If no changes need to be made to the mold, it's a relatively brand new mold, but you're having some pains in other areas such as delivery, communication, availability, whatever it ends up being. If you're just transferring that mold and no changes are made, expectations of, hey, we'll do the sample part fully machined, coated, send it over. But maybe Rachel and Stephanie talk a little bit more about sampling and FAI and really getting that launched into production after the transfer.
Yeah, so once we go live with the part, it stops at our quality department, Tim. We do designated PPAPs by our customers. Some have different levels, as you know. FAIs are all parts. We do first articles on all key dimensions. It could be we could do full quality checks on one critical dimension or 2 critical dimensions. It's really going to be customer designated. However, we do X-ray testing, heat treat analysis.
Liquid penetrant.
Yeah, it left my brain, sorry. Yeah, penetration testing. So there's a good catalog of testing that we do prior to releasing it to production, Tim.
Yes, and it's all driven too by the needs of the customer. So if there's a specific testing you need that is not currently quoted or provided, we can certainly add that to the FAI terms. But at the end of the day, it's really kind of what is the end use of the part and what do you expect to see in each production run you receive, and do we need to repeat that every time? So for example, measuring the critical dimensions for each part, or is it just specific dimensions?
Yeah, and finding that out ahead of time is the
Yeah.
most important thing, just like we did on this slide here, is what are your critical specs? That's a question that we would ask at early onset of the project. I think we've had a few customers that we've onboarded, Tim, that had a few quality criteria that weren't necessary. So being the experts in our field, we noted that, right? That's a cost reduction for our customers. And also it's not so much of a schedule drain when we're doing unnecessary steps. So that's important to know.
It sounds like communication's key, really understanding from the beginning, hey, what shapes the tool in, what's it fit on, where's the part end up, what's cosmetic, what's not, what's actually needed on the tolerancing side of things. Is there inspection requirements? Is there timing expectations? And how can we help do that?
Yeah, and just want to tag on to that. Rachel and I also do visits to our potential clients as well to view those tools or problems and understand what the problem statement is in person as well. So if there's a visit in order, we're more than willing to do that. And we do that often. So just throwing it out there is not always, just come to BPI. If we happen to be the vendor that you want to choose, it's going to be a two-way street. We definitely love to visit our potential and current customers' headquarters to understand how we can help them in their business.
Thanks for listening to Casting Class, the engineer's podcast for all things metal casting. For more episodes, videos, and guides, check out BatesvilleProducts.com. See you next month.